Now, this is from Tibet. The Buddha as manifestation. This wonderful posture, this is known as earth-touching, bhumi sparsha. And when this quester, this seeker, this Buddha, one who was about to be the Buddha, came to the tree in the middle of the universe, the axis mundi, which is called the immovable spot, he sat there. That's a psychological condition. You don't have to go to Bodh Gaya to find the immovable spot. You've got it right here, if you have it. And what it is, it's the spot that is not moved by desire and fear. So, to test him, there came the Lord of the world, and his name was Desire and Fear. As desire, he was called Kama, K-A-M-A, long A, first one. That means lust, desire, delight, pleasure. And he tried to move the Buddha by displaying to him his three beautiful daughters, posturizing sort of beautiful gals. And their names were Desire, Fulfillment, and Regrets. Future, present, and past. Now, he had disengaged himself from the biology of this body, and so he wasn't moved. Well, Kama was unhappy about that, and so he turned himself into Mara, M-A-R-A, the Lord of Death, to inspire fear. And he throws at the Buddha all the weaponry of an army of ogres. There's nobody there. This is why we don't picture him in the early works. He was not present as a body. He had disengaged himself. And so the weapons were turned into lotuses as they entered his field of non-entity, and he was, as it were, worshipped. And now comes the hard one for good Christians to appreciate. Kama, Mara, was now desperate, and he turns himself into Dharma, the Lord of social duty. That's supposed to be Christianity. How in heaven's name you're going to find your own track if you're always doing what society tells you your duty is, you see? So it's at that point that Mara, now as Dharma, duty, says to him, young prince, you are supposed to be on your throne, governing a country. Don't you read the morning papers? Don't you know what's going on? Things are falling apart. There are picket lines all over the place. What do you do when that call comes? He just dropped his hand and touched the earth. This is bhumi sparsha. Don't try to move me with this journalistic appeal. I'm interested in eternity. And he calls the goddess Mother Universe to witness to his right to be there. And she, in her majesty, with a voice that resounded like thunder around the horizon, said, this is my beloved son, who through innumerable lifetimes has so given of himself that there's nobody here. And with that, the elephant on which Dharma was riding bowed in worship. The army was dispersed, and the Buddha achieved illumination. So that symbolizes akshobhya, not to be moved. This is the first position. You have found it, you're sitting there, you're in the immovable spot, and no appeal of the journalistic field of time is going to move you. That's the first step. The second step is, having found the still point, to come back into the field of time. So we have two Buddhisms. One, the small vehicle Buddhism that's going away from the field of time. And then another Buddhism that comes in the 1st century AD and is represented by this, that we are manifestations, that we can move in this field of time, but without being moved. This is known as joyful participation in the sorrows of the world. And you can do that. And that's what's known as the Bodhisattva, B-O-D-H-I, S-A-T-T-V-A. Sattva, one whose being Sattva means being. Bodhi is illumination. And with that still point having been found, you can move into the field of movement and not move. You see what I mean? That's the important thing. Now, years ago, I had a wonderful friend, Heinrich Zimmer. And he was a really gifted interpreter of symbolic forms. And he was lecturing here in New York on Buddhism. And he wanted to describe the difference between the little vehicle Buddhism, Hinayana, and the big vehicle Buddhism, Mahayana. And he used a wonderful image that I'm going to try to render to you. When the Buddha achieved illumination that night, he was so stunned that he sat for 7 days in one place without moving. Bing! This is being utterly removed from the field of time. Then he got up and walked 7 paces back and stood for 7 days looking at the place where he had been sitting. This is relating the temporal to the immovable realization. And then for 7 days he walked back and forth between the two places, relating, integrating, and then sat down under another tree, and his first thought was, this cannot be taught. That's the first fact about Buddhism and what I'm talking about here. This cannot be taught. You know this saying, you can lead a girl to Vasa, but you can't make her think. So no sooner had he had that thought than the gods, Indra and Brahma, came down. Just as in Christianity, the deity of the older tradition is still present, so in Buddhism, the deity of the older tradition, the deities, are present. And Indra and Brahma said, please teach for the salvation of mankind and the gods and all the world. And the Buddha said, I will teach. But what I teach is not Buddhism, it is the way to Buddhism. What's called Buddhism is a vehicle to carry you to Buddhist realization. And the word for vehicle is yana, Y-A-N-A. And the vehicle specifically that's referred to is a ferry boat. So Buddhism is called a ferry boat, and it's taking us to a yonder shore. And the yonder shore is the shore beyond pain and pleasure, gain and loss, you see? Fear and desire, you and me. It's the transcendence of duality in the realization of the cosmic unity, or trans-cosmic unity. So my friend Simmer then said, well, now if we want to understand Buddhism and the two Buddhisms, Hinayana and Mahayana, little ferry boat and big ferry boat, let's think about a ferry boat.